નમસ્કાર વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, વિરામ બાદ આપ સૌનું હાર્દિક સ્વાગત છે. વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, આપ જાણો છો તેવી જ રીતે MA ઇંગ્લિશ MEG 2ના પરામર્શન માટે આજે આપણે સવારથી ચર્ચા કરી રહ્યા છીએ. અત્યારે આપણી સાથે ઉપસ્થિત છે ડૉક્ટર AK સિંઘ સાહેબ. એ તમને MA ઇંગ્લિશ એટલે કે MEG 2નું પરામર્શન આપી રહ્યા છે. એ પહેલાં હું તમને થોડી ઇન્સ્ટ્રક્શન આપી દઉં. વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, જો તમારો પ્રશ્ન લાંબો હોય એટલે કે તમે ફોન પર ના કહી શકો એવો હોય, ડિસ્ક્રિપ્ટિવ હોય, તો એને લખીને પણ તમે સિંઘ સાહેબને પૂછી શકો છો. એના માટેનું એડ્રેસ, ફોન નંબર, ઈમેલ એડ્રેસ, આ દરેક વસ્તુ અમે કાર્યક્રમની શરૂઆતમાં આપી છે અને કાર્યક્રમના અંતમાં પણ આપીશું. આપ ચોક્કસ એ નોંધી લેજો અને એ જ ફોન નંબર્સ, ઈમેલ એડ્રેસનો ઉપયોગ કરી અને આપ ચોક્કસ પ્રશ્નો પૂછો. અત્યારે પણ અમે ચર્ચા ચાલુ રાખીએ છીએ, તે દરમિયાન આપને કોઈ પ્રશ્ન મૂંઝવતો હોય તો તમે ચોક્કસ પૂછી શકો છો. ફોન નંબર એકવાર ફરી વખત નોંધી લેશો: 232-13-096, 232-13-097, 232-13-101. ફેક્સ નંબર છે 232-13-102. વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, આપણે ચર્ચા શરૂ કરીએ છીએ. સિંઘ સાહેબ, આપનું ફરીથી એકવાર સ્વાગત છે. આપણે બ્રિટિશ ડ્રામાની ચર્ચા કરી રહ્યા હતા, એ જ ચર્ચાને આગળ વધારીએ.
જી મેમ. Since we had a gap in our discussion, I would again repeat a few points. One, Shakespeare is the central point to consider British drama, and we divided British drama into pre-Shakespearean and post-Shakespearean periods. And in pre-Shakespearean periods, we had seen British drama in terms of cycles, in terms of mystery, miracles, interlude, first comedy and first tragedy, and the university wits. Amongst the university wits, the most important was Christopher Marlowe. And Christopher Marlowe wrote poems, tragedies, and historical play as well. The text that's prescribed for you is Dr. Foster's, and the play deals with, as you know, a character that is from base stock, from a very humble background, and from that humble background, because of his ambition, because of his subscription to that particular ambition, he becomes the protagonist of the play. I'd like to take a couple of minutes here to make a few things clear to you. Marlowe, the dramatist, wanted to initiate a few things in the field of British drama. The reason primarily was that he was acquainted with the classical traditions and the kind of enthusiasm and spirit that he had, and the age, because he died fairly young. With all that, he could bring about revolution in British drama, and this he had in a major way stated in Tamburlaine. And if you read a few lines there, he very categorically says, "From the jigging veins of rhyming mother wits, and such conceit, such clownage keeps in pay, we shall take you to the Scythian fields," and so on and so on. In these 7 to 8 lines that you would find in your text in the complete works of Christopher Marlowe, what one sees is that he very categorically says that he will take us away from the rhyming scheme that was followed in plays earlier. He would move to what we say blank verse. So that was one area of experimentation that he was going to do. Then in the second line he speaks of, "And such conceit, such clownage keeps in pay." He would take us away from the comic element. That means from comic to tragic. So one shift is from rhyming scheme to blank verse. Second thing is that from comic to serious themes, and third, where he says, we shall take you to stately tents of war. The theme would deal with something grandeur, something majestic, uh, something stately. That's the word, important word there. And then he says Scythian Timberland. This Timberland comes from Scythia. That's where he was a shepherd, and that means what he says is that all his tragic protagonists would have humble background, and that explains the humble background of Dr. Faustus as well. And then scourging the world. That's the phrase used there by Marlowe. That means his protagonists would become the scourge of the world. That means with their ambition, they would become the most towering figure there. Now, if we look at these lines, if we look at some of these interpretations, then what one sees is that these lines become manifesto of Christopher Marlowe. Manifesto in the sense that he makes us aware of the fact that he is going to bring about some radical change in what we say classical conventions of classical tragedy. And the shift that we see is in terms of classical tragic hero. Classical tragic hero to Marlowean tragic hero. Marlowe does not follow the model what we say as classical tragic hero. That we shall discuss a little later when we would compare classical tragic hero with Marlowean tragic hero with Shakespearean tragic hero, so that the things would become clear for us. What I wanted to say was that amongst the predecessors of Shakespeare, Marlowe was most important. And amongst the successors of Shakespeare, immediate successors and contemporaries, Ben Jonson was most important. As far as Shakespeare was concerned, what he did was that he mingled alien, that is classical elements, with the native wild notes, and thereby he could create what we know as English drama or British drama in his writings that are around 37. I say around with the view because some of the plays are of doubtful authorship. Amongst these 37 plays, we have comedies, we have tragedies, we have tragicomedies, and then we have histories and Roman plays in them. This is the period, what we can say Shakespearean period. 16 he dies, and one can say from 1590 to 1616 is the period when Shakespeare dominates. If we look at the third phase, that is pre-Shakespearean, Shakespearean, I have just very briefly dealt with it because we will have to deal with Shakespeare in detail. Post-Shakespearean period. Post-Shakespearean period, we can divide into at least 6 subsections, and it is a huge chunk of dramatic history, because we are covering the period from 1616 to say 1980s or what we can roughly say contemporary period, and therein we will see the texts that are prescribed for you. We will try to locate them there. Post-Shakespearean period is the period of his contemporaries as well, and therein what we find is one, Ben Jonson, who kept writing even after Shakespeare, and we discussed the way he wrote plays based on the Renaissance theory of physiology based on humors. Ben Jonson, apart from Ben Jonson, is another set of another what one can say two dramatists who wrote in collaboration, Biomo and Fletcher, and the play that earned the attention was Killed with Kindness. Middleton, Webster, Duchess of Malfi's fame, Haywood, Messenger, and Shirley, they wrote in this period. By 1660, you see that the Puritans or the supporters of the Commonwealth, they come to power and all theatre activities are closed. All theatres are also closed. And that's the period of not decline of British drama, but this is the period of some kind of break in British drama. And therefore, after this post-Shakespearean first phase, the second phase is of Restoration comedy. That is 1660 onwards. And Restoration comedy, the important voices are Wycherley, Congreve, Farquhar, and two authors I like to mention in this period. One of them would be Dryden. He did not write Restoration comedies. Dryden wrote what we say heroic tragedy, and the thing worth remembering about Dryden is that in a play like All for Love, his basic purpose is to arouse not catharsis, but basic purpose is to arouse admiration, and that's where heroic tragedy differs from the tragedy of the staple sort, that its primary aim is not to arouse the feelings of pity and fear, but to arouse admiration for the protagonists in the minds and the hearts of the viewers, spectators, or readers. Towards the end of this period, we have to think of dramatists like Sheridan, who wrote plays, as you remember, Rivals, say for instance, and School for Scandal, and in that play, in his plays, what he wrote was the age of artificial comedy that he wrote, and this is the age of artificial comedy. The third post-Shakespearean phase is Romantic period. Now, here what we have to see is that 18th century in general, particularly the second half, is of decline of drama. This is the period when we find prose writings, essays, and the novels, the novel form, not novels I should say, the novel form comes in existence, and the ascendance of novel ironically or unfortunately coincides with decline in drama. The new class that came in existence, the new middle class, what I mean, it came into existence, did not have either time or money for theatre, and the result was their new theatre that was novel, that they subscribed to, that they used, and the drama suffered, or drama went through a state of decline. In the Romantic period, the period say from 1780 to 1830, roughly 50 years or so. In this period, you have a few dramatists writing here and there, and then the important one that comes to our mind is Shelley's Prometheus Unbound. But one thing that we have to keep in mind here is that in Romantic period, drama as an activity suffered, but criticism of drama prospered. Most of the Romantic poets, including Coleridge, they wrote on drama, they commented on drama, and none of them could ignore Shakespeare in different ways. This is followed by fourth post-Shakespearean phase, that is Victorian period. And Victorian period, we roughly say 1840 to 1910, and therein the important voice in this period is Oscar Wilde. And as we know, Oscar Wilde wrote engaging comedies, comedies of wit. And witticist as he was, he made use of it, but he did not make much experimentation in the form of drama. So craftsmanship did suffer in this period. This fifth post-Shakespearean phase is modern period. That's roughly first half of the 20th century. Let's not go into the year-wise demarcation. And in the first half, one stimulus comes from Irish Renaissance, revival of Irish traditions, Irish culture, and we have a person in the form of Singh, whom you have in your course. On the other hand, we have T.S. Eliot, who revives drama, as we discussed a little while earlier, in Murder in Cathedral, Confidential Clerk, and the Family Reunion, among others. The poetic drama was revived by T.S. Eliot. The other dramatist worth remembering this period is Galsworthy, and the plays that he wrote, like Justice and among others, they're all problem plays, problems of the society. He takes them up for dramatic representation, and then he tries to suggest the ways to tackle the problem, or he tries to point out the problem that exists through dramatic manifestation of the problem. Grenville Barker, J.M. Barrie, there are other dramatists, but the author whom we can't ignore is G.V. Shaw, and G.V. Shaw's Pygmalion is in your course, and as all of us know, was primarily a dramatist of ideas, and made use of his wit profusely in his plays, though he did not confine himself to just social problems, social, political, and even problems of life were major subjects in his plays. The last phase of the post-Shakespearean period is what we say post-war British drama, or what we can say in the contemporary drama. Now, in this contemporary drama, we can find out a few hills. I hope you know what I mean by hills here. The few important figures in this period. This was the period of the post World War II. After the suffering of the World War, there were a few activities that led to the change in the political scenario, the frequent shift from Labour to Conservatives, or from Conservatives to Labour, kind of prosperity in 1950s, and prior to that, the legislation of the New Theatre Bill that was introduced in 1949, and the basic purpose of this bill was that the Labour government promised that it would construct theatre houses for the people, so that it becomes an accessible space to the people. It did take some time, but its result were seen much later. New morality also is something that we discuss in 60s and 70s, the rights of women, and the most palpable experience that people felt was that of a kind of absurdity. And keeping that in mind, what one sees is a few dramatists are there. One can't ignore Christopher Fry, who wrote plays like Ladies Not for Burning. Another, like as we discussed, John Osborne earlier, for introducing angry young man, anti-hero in Look Back in Anger. He's another dramatist that we have to take note. Then Samuel Beckett, that you study, particularly his Waiting for Godot. We can say that he is not a British dramatist. primarily because, so we will say foreign with the single minute quotes. He is primarily from Ireland, but he spent most of his time in France, in Paris in particular, wrote in French and in English as well. But for our convenience, we put in the category of British dramatists, and we know how he changed the notions of plot, notions of characterization, and the kind of the meta language that he made use of in his play. Uh, Another dramatist, Pinter, is one whom we can't ignore. Pinter, John Arden, Arnold Wesker, Tom Stoppard is one name that we have to take note of, particularly for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Is a play that earned much fame for itself. The In 1971, a play that deserves our attention is Lear by Edward Bond, and the way the theme of King Lear is reworked by Edward Bond is dealt with in this particular play. And in the 70s and 80s, the name that again we have to mention here is the name of Carol Churchill, particularly Cloud Nine and Top Girls, opening new vistas in terms of craftsmanship, in terms of thematic preoccupation, as well as in terms of treatment, in treatment of these themes in language. This is how we have to think of looking at British drama in brief. And for your sake, I would again repeat, British drama we can divide in three parts: pre-Shakespearean, Shakespearean, and post-Shakespearean. Pre-Shakespearean deals with early beginning, and the forms that develop there include mysteries, miracles, morality plays, interludes, and then first comedies and first tragedies. First tragedy comes in existence. Shakespearean, 37 plays and the works of his contemporaries, say from 1590 to 1620, for our sake. I've been changing dates by a year or so here and there, and that speaks of my personal dissatisfaction with the periodization. And then the post-Shakespearean phase that we divided into six parts. And post-Shakespearean was one, the period of what we say neoclassical and restoration. Second was the restoration comedy in particular. Third was the romantic period. Fourth was the Victorian period. Fifth, modern period. That's roughly first half of the 20th century. And the last is the post-war contemporary, or what you can even say postmodern British drama. This is how we can have an idea about British drama. We can look at the texts that are prescribed for us. We can look at different tendencies also that prevail and pervade in this period. The moment we study these periods, then we get an idea about the evolution of the form of drama, the causes for decline, and the causes for the rise of certain forms in certain kinds of drama, certain kinds of British drama in certain period. For a better understanding of this, I would recommend one book to all of you, and that you should read before you study these texts, and that book is British Drama by Allardyce Nicholl. That's the text. I again repeat, Allardyce Nicholl's British Drama, that treats all these things in detail and deals with the development of theatre also in England, in Britain in general. That's what is something that we wanted to discuss about the history of British drama. Now I move to the third part of today's assignment. First part was general instructions, the instructions that you would use for studying materials. Second part I devoted to periodization and also to a kind of bird's eye view, or if you say you know uh, valley and hill view of British drama. Now we move to certain specifics, and the specifics are uh, Shakespearean tragedy. Um, this would help us in understanding Marlowe. This would help us in understanding the departures that Shakespeare introduced from the classical drama as well as from Marlowean drama. Uh, Shakespearean tragedy is primarily a mingling of classical and romantic tragedy. What I mean by romantic tragedy is the space that Shakespeare manipulates to subscribe and not to subscribe to classical conventions. First of all, we shall deal with the salient features of a Shakespearean tragedy. Shakespeare has four principal tragedies. One is Hamlet, which is a tragedy of revenge. Then King Lear, Macbeth, and Othello. Hamlet is tragedy of revenge, I said earlier, but with a few reservations. So we would put revenge in single inverted commas. But if we have to sum it up in a sentence, then we will have to say it's a tragedy of revenge. Othello, of domestic issues. King Lear and Macbeth, they are primarily chronicle histories with variations on them, where folk tales and chronicle histories, they are all made use of. To separate the two, one can say that in King Lear, ingratitude is the important theme, and in Macbeth, it is the ambition without caring for means. That's the important theme. Here, since I mentioned the term ingratitude, therefore I like to mention it here that ingratitude is one of the most principal preoccupation in Shakespeare. In all of his plays, one way or other. Ingratitude is the thing that Shakespeare finds most engrossing, because this is an evil that plagues humanity even today, as it did in the times of Shakespeare, because that's something that has been persistent in human nature. These four tragedies, that is Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, and Macbeth. Let us briefly sum up the traits of these tragedies. One is the plot of these tragedies. Plot. What is plot then? Plot is nothing but arrangement of incidents. That's how Aristotle defines. All of you would be knowing it very well. Now, the events, as we had seen earlier in Hamlet, it is revenge. I mention it again because Hamlet is prescribed for you. Now, plot in Shakespeare is arranged in 5 basic stages. One, you can say exposition. Second, complication. Third, what we know as climax or crisis. Fourth is denouement, D-E-N-O-U-M-E-N-T, denouement or falling action. And fifth is catastrophe or solution, what we say. Now, if we are specifically concerned with Hamlet, then exposition is, as you know, in the beginning. Complication begins with the appearance of the ghost. The crisis emanates from Hamlet's knowledge that his uncle is the murderer of his father, and when he comes to know certain motives about his mother's marriage with the murderer of his father, that is Gertrude's marriage with Claudius. A denouement is sometime somewhere in the fourth act, when Hamlet comes to know from the play within the play, and then the letter that he finds that his uncle wants to get rid of him, get him murdered. Falling action, and catastrophe is the duel scene when in the duel Hamlet and Laertes, they exchange their swords, and since Laertes is fatally wounded, and Laertes knows that the sword that he had is, its tip is poisoned, and then he tells Hamlet, and then we know what happens, leads to the murder of Hamlet, death of Laertes. Polonius is already dead. Gertrude dies because of poisoning, and Claudius is killed by Hamlet. This is what we have to say in terms of plot structure. You can apply this into other tragedies as well. Now, the next is action. That is, plot is arrangement of action. Action is what happens in mind and in terms of action, in terms of external behavior. That is, thought and the manifestation of what happens inside through external action. In Hamlet, when we look at, it is the internal action that predominates. Not that external action is not there, but in comparison to external action, it is the internal action that's important. It is just opposite to Othello, where less of internal action and more of external action is there. Shakespeare, the varied genius that he was, he wanted to show the different facets of human personality. What is then tragic? After plot structure, action, and tragic. Tragic is the enormous wastage of human resources. Tragic is equivalent to serious, and serious in classical drama did not necessarily mean death. Though in the British drama, most of the tragic heroes die before the end of the play, and that's why one of the critics said in lighter vein, what did the protagonist die of in a tragedy? And the answer was given, the protagonist died of the last act. That one can very easily say like that. But tragic is serious. Serious is passage of human situation from prosperity to adversity. Now, in case of the play like Hamlet, what is tragic? Tragic is that the human potentialities that Hamlet had, the human resources that are around him, all of them are wasted. The human potentialities in the character of Hamlet that are not realized, and apart from the tragic hero, there are other victims as well. So what one sees is that what we say good perishes. Ophelia says at a stage in Hamlet, what a noble mind is overthrown. The line that you remember in the nunnery scene, what a noble mind is overthrown. And what kind of mind was he? Apart from being a noble mind, he was a scholar's eye, a courtier's tongue, and a soldier's sword. These attributes he had. And so painfully she says, woe is me to have seen what I see what I see. This is the realization even on the part of a character that would herself leave the scene, where the good perishes in tragedies. But the important thing that is there is that in Shakespeare, good perishes, but evil is not victorious. That is, be it Claudius or or it is even Iago. Even Iago is not victorious in Othello. Therefore, what happens is that the impact is very elevating. The impact of tragedy is elevating. Despite unrealization of human potentialities, wastage of human resources, impact is elevating. The next important point then is the question of tragic hero. Shakespearean tragic hero, and therein you can put Hamlet also. Here I would like you to think of the classical tragic hero, and what are the principal attributes of a classic tragic hero. Number one, classical tragic hero was, I'll use the word was a person of high status, and he was a prince or a king. He was central, prince or a king. Naturally, he was central to the society, and he is central to the play as well. The centrality comes from the virtues, the qualities of head and heart. This we find in Shakespeare also. That Shakespearean tragic hero is central, is a person of high status. The only difference is that a Shakespearean tragic hero is a general, military general also. Like Hamlet is a prince, Lear is the king, Othello is a general, and Macbeth is a Thane of Cawdor, as we know him. He was a Thane. All of them had a kind of centrality in terms of society, centrality in terms of the thematic demands of the play. In between, that is, between classical tragic hero and Shakespearean tragic hero, Marlowean tragic hero is slightly different. The basic difference in Marlowean tragic hero is that he is not a prince or a king. He is not a person of high status. Marlowean tragic hero is either a shepherd, son of a shepherd. Tamburlaine is a son of a shepherd. Barabbas is a trader, and Dr. Faustus is a scholar. The scholar, not from a very rich family, because his family couldn't support his education. Therefore, his relatives had to. That's the difference. So Shakespearean tragic hero, in terms of high status, centrality, and qualities, comes very close to classical tragic hero. Now, the second point that we will have to discuss is the rise. Classical tragic hero rises because of high status, because of his centrality, and because of his qualities. Marlowean tragic hero rises not because of high status. Marlowean tragic hero becomes central because of his ambition, the towering ambition that he has. Son of a shepherd in Tamburlaine wants to be the most politically powerful person in the world. Barabbas, the trader, wants to be the richest person in the world. Dr. Faustus, that you study, son of family that's base stock, wants to be the greatest scholar of the world, wants the entire knowledge of the world to be at his disposal. The question then is that how does Marlowean tragic hero rise? Marlowean tragic hero rises because what he wants to be, because of his ambition. And in Marlowean tragic hero, what we find is that he falls in the process of rising. Marlowean tragic hero rises because he wants to be a person of ceaseless height, of limitless height in the field, and does not care for the means. There is nothing wrong in nourishing ambition, but the important point is how to fulfill those ambition. Marlovian tragic heroes tend to become Machiavellian, where ends are important, means are not. We can understand more in case of Machiavellian attitude towards means as against to Gandhian attitude to means. So Machiavellian attitude does not care for the means, it cares only for the end. Marlovian tragic hero, all of them are Machiavellians, and Machiavelli appears in the prologue of the G of Malta. And you remember those lines when he says, religion is but a toy. Line something like that is there. Then the classical tragic hero, he falls not because of his own doing. At times his fall is predetermined. For instance, Oedipus. Oedipus, when we look at the very birth of Oedipus, he is informed, the father of Oedipus is informed that the son would prove to be inauspicious for you because he would be the murderer of his father and he would marry his mother. Therefore, what we see is that Oedipus's tragedy is destined. He has no role to play. What we can say, destiny is character in classical tragedy. In Marlowe, what we see is it's not destiny that is the character. Destiny does not author the tragedy of Marlowe, Marlovian tragic heroes. It is the character that is the author of his own tragedy. We find in Dr. Foster, thus studied by you, that Foster has a choice. Choice is to be a scholar or not to be a scholar. He has made up his mind that he wants to be a scholar. So there is no question of that. When we meet Foster first, we are very sure that he wants to be that, and in the first speech we tell so. But what he does is that he rejects all other domains of knowledge, all other systems of knowledge. He rejects medicine, he rejects laws, he rejects logic, he rejects, as you know, the other domains. When he makes choice, because he considers all these fields of knowledge as inadequate, because even after knowing Marlowe would be a man and he wants to be more than man, and more than man is possible only by the use of necromancy, that's black magic. And this is the choice he makes. And even when he makes choice, there is the conflict in him is represented by what we say as, good and evil. Good and evil, both of them appear, and they ask Marlowe's protagonist by putting forward their views, and ultimately it is the advice of evil that Faustus pays heed to, even when he is signing the bond to Mephistopheles, that he would have Mephistopheles as his servant for 24 years, and thereafter he would have his soul taken away in exchange for this particular bond. So what is it? The moment he signs the bond in blood, at that moment there is something written there, and what is written is homo fuge. And homo fuge, if translated, it stands for run men run. So the kind of message is very clear for Faustus. Here again he does not make a choice. a correct choice. He makes a choice, but he does not make a correct choice. He chooses, but he chooses wrongly, and therefore, for his wrong choice, he has to pay. And naturally, the consequence is his damnation, where he can't take recourse to forgiveness or mercy of either God or the Son of the God, Christ. And when they do not show mercy to you, there is no other element, either in the sky or on the earth or in the subterranean world, to rescue you. That's the point there. In Shakespeare, what we see is that the hamartia or tragic flaw is is found in different sources. In the classical tragic hero, it is in destiny to a good extent, or the lack of knowledge. In Marlowe, it is in the wrong choice, and in Shakespeare, we can locate it in different places, in different points. Let's look at the characters. Say, for instance, Othello. He is what kind of character is he? He is a noble, a valiant general, all in all. You know what's termed is all in all sufficient. But what is the hamartia? Hamartia. That's the Greek word used by Aristotle, translated as the flaw, FLAW, flaw or error in judgment. That's the another way it's properly translated. Flaw is not the tragic flaw is not the only correct translation. So error in judgment. So the flaw in or the hamartia in Othello is that he is a slave of jealousy. Macbeth, what kind of person is he? He is a peerless kinsman, but he is a peerless kinsman, too full of milk of human kindness. But what is the hamartia? Hamartia in him is he has black and deep desire, quote unquote, black and deep desire. Lear is every inch a king, but he is infirm in his mind. And as far as Hamlet is concerned, if we pinpoint one flaw in him, that is over speculation. He is over meditative. He speculates, does not execute, as opposite to Othello, who executes but does not speculate. So this is what we see in 4 tragedies of Shakespeare, and what one can see is that all 4 tragedies have different source of hamartia, a different source of tragic flaw. If we want to sum up the sources of tragic flaw, one can find them in moral considerations. Like his tragic protagonists are at times concerned about moral considerations. For instance, Hamlet finds his uncle praying in the prayer room, and by this time he is pretty sure that he is the murderer of his father, and that's the position where he can easily murder his uncle. And if he had done that, then tragedy wouldn't have taken place. But he doesn't kill his uncle there. He does not murder the murderer of his father. The basic reason that he gives there is that we know from his speech that if I kill him at the moment in the prayer room, then he would go to heaven, and he wants the villain to go to hell. So he would murder him, he would kill him when he is in some compromising state or in some compromising act. and therefore he does not kill. And then this moral consideration becomes the cause of tragedy. Psychological, for instance, in case of Othello, Othello is very credulous, very gullible kind of person. He believes in whatever Iago says. He doesn't question. But he does not remain so in case of Desdemona. And that's the psychological weakness, one can say. This psychological weakness one can find in Lear and Macbeth also to some extent, but not as much as we find in Othello. Supernatural elements, they also play their role in the tragic fall of Shakespearean tragic hero. Say, for instance, ghost in Hamlet, witches in Macbeth, ghost in Hamlet. They determine the future course. The witches prepare the blueprint for Macbeth's tragedy by instilling, by sowing the seed of ambition in his mind. And as we know, the ghost in Macbeth, sorry, it's not Macbeth, a ghost in Hamlet becomes the cause as he unveils the hidden layers in the graveyards. And then chance element, that also plays its role. Again, for the chance element, one can go to Othello, say, for instance, because in Othello what one sees is that when Desdemona loses her handkerchief, it's by chance that Emilia finds it, and after finding it, she hands it over to Iago. In case she has not done that, in case these two things had not happened, perhaps the tragedy of Othello would have been avoided. Then, apart from this, the important element in Shakespeare is like the comic element, that he mingled tragic with comic element and poetry. That's there.
सर मैं आपको याद दिला दूं, बस हमारे पास अब 5 मिनट और ज्यादा है.
I'll sum it up so that students, those who are there at the other end, they can note down a few points.
Okay.
Therefore, when we examine Shakespearean tragedy and tragic hero in comparison to classical tragic hero and Marlowean tragic hero, then we have to keep in mind a few points. You can still note down the point pertaining to plot structure in Hamlet in terms of exposition, complication, climax, denouement, and catastrophe. Then we have to think in terms of action, external action and internal action. Then what is tragic there? Tragic yet elevating. Then tragic hero, his high status, his centrality, rise in his action, rise in his character, stature, then fall because of tragic flaw. And in Shakespeare, tragic flaw emanates from moral, psychological, supernatural, and chance. One of them or all of them. And then the element of comedy mingled with tragic that acts as comic relief, and at times the best and highest thoughts come from the words of fools and the protagonists, wherein the beauty lies in finding a vision of the world, vision of life, against all futilities, against all absurdities. When nothing is in our hands, what is the way out? How to live in a world of unlivable situation? An answer that Shakespeare gives is one answer one finds in King Lear and another in Hamlet. An answer, if both of them be put together, one is ripeness is all, another is readiness is all. Whatever circumstances are there, we have to be ready for them, and that's how we can live with unlivable. We can laugh at the cruelties and crudities of fate, destiny, or circumstances, which are more powerful than what we are. This is how we can study Shakespearean tragedy in brief yet systematic manner. When we meet next, we shall be dealing with a Shakespearean comedy, because Midsummer Night's Dream is also prescribed for you, and then move to British novel. We will not be dealing with each and every text, but that would be done at your centers in the form of counseling. But let me request you to make use of the email services that I am willing to provide. Those email IDs are there. My address is also there. Please do write to me, and let me tell you, those who would flood me with questions, those who would have maximum questions, we would invite some of them for this program as well.
Okay.
I thank you all very much. I thank you, ma'am, for
Yes, sir.
being so kind and considerate all through. Thank you all very much. Wish you all the best. May God bless you.
વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, તમે જે એડ્રેસ જોઈ રહ્યા હતા તે ઈમેલ એડ્રેસ અને ફોન નંબર્સ બંને એક વખત ફરીવાર નોંધી લો. આ જ નંબરનો તમે ચોક્કસ ઉપયોગ કરો, અને તમને જો પરામર્શન પછી પણ કોઈ પ્રશ્ન હોય તો આ નંબરનો ઉપયોગ કરીને સિંહ સાહેબનો કોન્ટેક્ટ કરી શકો છો. એ તમને ચોક્કસ એના તમને જવાબો આપશે. વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, અહીંયા આપણે ઇંગ્લિશનું કાઉન્સેલિંગ પૂરું કરીએ છીએ. હવે પછી ફરી વખત આપણે મળવાના જ છીએ આના પછીના કલાકમાં. એ પછી પણ આપણે 29મી જાન્યુઆરી અને 5મી ફેબ્રુઆરી પણ મળવાના જ છીએ. એટલે ઇંગ્લિશના વિદ્યાર્થીઓ જો સેન્ટર પર ન રહે તો એમને જણાવી દઈએ કે 29મી જાન્યુઆરી અને 5 ફેબ્રુઆરીએ ફરી વખત આપણે કાઉન્સેલિંગ સેશન રાખી રહ્યા છીએ. અત્યારે પણ તમને આ સિવાયના કોઈ ચોક્કસ વિષયો માટે કાઉન્સેલિંગની જરૂર હોય તો તમે અમને ચોક્કસ લખીને મોકલો યુનિવર્સિટીના એડ્રેસ પર. વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, અહીં આજે સિંહ સાહેબ ઉપસ્થિત રહ્યા અને આપણને ઇંગ્લિશનું પરામર્શન આપ્યું, એ માટે એમનો યુનિવર્સિટી તરફથી આભાર માનું છું સિંહ સાહેબ. અને ફરી વખત આપણે 5 મિનિટના વિરામ બાદ તરત જ મળીએ છીએ MA સમાજશાસ્ત્ર સાથે. વિદ્યાર્થી મિત્રો, આપ સાથે જ રહેજો. નમસ્કાર.